The Nazi regime. How controlled communication led to a lack of understanding. The Nazi Party controlled communication in and out of the regime, which ultimately led to a lack of understanding by the outside world in regards to the horrific acts they were committing. They manipulated the media the masses consumed using propaganda. Both acts were typically successful at garnering as much support for their movement as possible. On November 11, 1918, World War I was concluded. Germany had lost and the nation lost everything, from land to military in the Treaty of Versailles. German currency was virtually worthless and the once powerful nation was now in poverty. The German people were wounded and looking for a new leader. The Weimar Republic, formed after World War I, was weak and had no support from the general public on either side of the political equation. In the early 1920s, Adolf Hitler came to the forefront of the political scene. He was able to provide answers to questions the German population had during this time of turmoil and commit to a greater Germany. He gained the trust of the people through the usage of propaganda. Propaganda is the spread of media that is used to support a cause. Hitler used propaganda as a form of communication between him and Germany, especially in order to promote a strong sense of nationalism and anti-Semitism among young Germans. In 1933, Hitler established the Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda with Joseph Goebbels at the head. Goebbels was an incredible speaker, second only to Hitler himself. They collectively recognized each other's capabilities when they met for the first time in 1925. Goebbels himself was an embodiment of what precisely made the Nazis so evil, often unsuspecting, yet so incredibly intelligent. A true master at persuading people, using specific words and emotions in order to gain supporters. He worked hard to spread the Nazi message to voters in the early elections, which was crucial in order for them to gain power and eventually overthrow the chancellor. This was the beginning of carefully curated communication between the Nazi government and the people of Germany in order to gain greater beliefs in their cause. Some members of the Nazi Party believed that the German people were easy to manipulate. In some ways, this was the truth. However, Germany wanted to hear what they had to say and truly wanted to believe in it, so they did. The party members did not solely use violence in order to further their cause. They distorted the truth in order to gain supporters, especially as they gained more power. They used to control the media by erasing the Jewish presence and ensuring that anti-Semitic material was evident everywhere. Germany was a wounded nation after World War I. They wanted someone to blame, and the party gave an answer: Jews. They wanted someone to save them, and the party gave an answer: Adolf Hitler. They wanted someone to help them become a great country once again, and the party gave an answer: themselves. The Nazis applied these techniques to a wide variety of forms of propaganda. Some of the most prominent examples include radio broadcasts, movie reels, newspapers, and posters/art. The radio was a primary way for families to hear communication from the federal government. The Nazis took advantage of this, eventually censoring German radios so they could only hear German news channels. It became a crime to have a radio from another nation that showed the news from a different perspective. American Nazi sympathizers, such as Mildred Gillers, also known as Axis Sally, would broadcast for Germans. She was attempting to unsettle the GIs listening, even though she, along with many other propagandists, were unsuccessful. She was still considered to be a traitor by the United States. Films were an important way to show Jews as incapable, dangerous beings, and Aryans as superior. A few examples of anti-Semitic movies include The Triumph of the Will, Festival of Nations, and Festival of Beauty by Lynn Riefenstahl. Each film was unique, but all portrayed a powerful, important Nazi party and weak, dangerous Jewish people. When the Nazis took control in 1933, there were approximately 4,700 newspapers in active circulation. Only approximately 1,100 were still in print 11 years later. All Jewish newspapers and journalists were eliminated. Most newspapers were run by the federal government in order to spread the Nazi message and anti-Semitism as much as possible. Those who attempted to share non-approved messages were imprisoned, killed, and/or tortured. Der Stürmer, the Attacker, was the most anti-Semitic newspaper in Germany, running from 1923 to 1945. It portrayed Jewish people as animals, thieves, and sexually promiscuous. Even some Nazis were aware it was a newspaper built on lies, but Hitler refused to take it down. After 1933, it became even more popular. Art was everywhere as a form of propaganda, being embedded into other forms. Caricatures, advertisement posters, movie reels, etc. all showed examples of the inferiority of anyone who was seen as a threat to the Aryan bloodline. Art, along with other forms of controlled communication, was a way for millions of people to be compliant during the Nazi regime. From the beginning, the dehumanizing of these people was what allowed for the genocide to occur. They were able to prove their superiority as Aryans when they showed others as being undesirable for existence, meaning they should be killed. Outside of propaganda, the Nazis ensured that the outside world did not know what they were really doing in camps. Theresienstadt Ghetto was an unfortunate example of their manipulation of communication with the rest of the world. By 1943, the Nazis had been running their concentration camps for several years. News had begun to spread of mistreatment and inhumane conditions around the globe. The Danish Red Cross, International Red Cross, and Danish government wished to investigate Theresienstadt. The Nazis encouraged this visit as they aimed to disprove reports about the true functions and conditions of ghettos/camps around Europe. They quickly got to work, reducing overcrowding, improving the conditions of the buildings, and adding activities for prisoners. At the June 23, 1944 visit, the Red Cross saw a model ghetto. They followed a pre-created path and spoke to prisoners that had already been told what they needed to say. The Red Cross was fooled by the masterminds of the Nazi Party. Their report showed no evidence of understanding of the true horrors that were occurring. Life went right back to normal after their visit, including deportations. From 1942 to 1944, the Germans created a film about Theresienstadt, another part of their attempt to show this location as a city for Jews, not a ghetto. The prisoners were required to play soccer games for it. Even for a moment, these people might have felt like they were in a different world, one where they could play sports for fun, not to fool those who might have been able to save them. This film was one of many over the course of the Holocaust. The Nazis fooled the viewers into seeing a place of joy for the people living there, rather than a place of death and destruction. The Nazi manipulation of thought occurred from the beginning of their rise to power. They began with gradual anti-Semitism that Jews generally did not think twice about, often not realizing what was happening till it was much too late. Inge Rosenthal was born on May 27, 1923, in Berlin, Germany. She grew up during Hitler's rise to power in the epicenter, watching German hatred for Jews grow right in front of her very eyes. Luckily enough, she survived the war by escaping to London on the Kindertransport in 1939.
Famous newspaper, the Stürmer. You might have heard of that. Well, there were weekly articles of anti-Jewish with the horrible caricatures that they put in. And I'm sure they suffered. But then they had a sort of a different attitude. There was anti-Semitism in Germany forever, when you think back. And it was the usual attitude, if you're just nice and quiet, it'll go away. And
once Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, 1945, the Nazis were essentially finished. The end of World War II in Europe officially came by May 7th with a German surrender, leaving a long-lasting impact on the world. Controlled communication has been found to be the key to Hitler's rise to power. The Nazi regime controlled communication in its entirety. They instilled their message everywhere, from posters to radios to speeches, especially during the beginning of their rise to power. A major reason why Hitler was able to become so powerful with relative ease was because of the way he presented himself and his ideals to the people of Germany. He took a vulnerable population and gave them the answer to their troubles, especially through his elaborate speeches and intelligently created propaganda. Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, is a popular quote by the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Winston Churchill, in 1948. It is remarkably powerful and remarkably true. If we, as a society, take the time to study Hitler's rise to power and truly try to understand it, we can try our best to prevent horrific events such as World War II and the Holocaust from ever happening again.